like last year. Thanks, Barb. I'm not going to start over. Okay. So we find ourselves like last year, long distance meetings over the internet. And I have to say that our meetings are getting smoother than they were when we first started. Because I can remember the beginning of last year where people were cutting out right and left and getting frozen on the screen. And I got to say that Zoom is getting better, whether it's our fault or Zoom, I don't know, but a lot less happening in those regards. Our regular meeting place, the church, is still on a bi-weekly basis, which just doesn't work for us for scheduling. So, and at least for the immediate future, we're going to be doing everything on the internet. We are set up to have people do self-guided things through our website. If you want to go see some of the birding hotspots, you can get on our website and click on that spot and find directions to the spot and what to look for. I have to say, I'm really impressed with our new website. We're still working out a few bugs, but I encourage everyone to go check it out and see what our hardcore group of 4 people have done with the help from a third party to get this thing up and running. I'm very impressed. I think it looks very professional. Is Dale still on? Are you still with us, Dale?
Yeah, I'm here.
I think we're pretty close to having all of our monthly meetings accounted for as far as guest presentations, aren't we?
Yeah, I still have April and May to fill. But
okay, we'll get
otherwise.
So we're coming along on that, and we've got some online classes, and Kaylin's involved in one of those, and and on our website we'll show you everything that's available to people. That we've made it easier to go through PayPal to donate or to sign up through memberships. And I'm not going to go too much in detail because because Cindy's going to show our new website quickly and show you what features that we have. So I'm just going to turn it over to Cindy, and I'm excited about the next year, and I hope everyone else is too.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. Just excited for, all the events that we're going to be trying to bring to everybody. And so just a quick overview of a couple of things that are coming up. And so this Thursday on Zoom at from 7 till 8, the 23rd, Kaylin's going to be kicking off an eBird webinar series. And I don't know, Kaylin, do you want to just quickly just let people know what's happening on the Thursday, the 23rd and the 30th?
Sure. Yep. So I'm sure some of you are familiar with the platform eBird, where you can enter your sightings, and it's a really great tool to find kind of local birding information. So this Thursday, the 23rd, I'm going to be running a little webinar on, say you want to go out birding this week, or we got lots of fall migrants coming back and you're curious where you might see the upcoming tundra swans or trumpeter swans, or you want to go out and plan a fun field trip to maybe out to Enumclaw or somewhere in the area. We're going to be going over how eBird can be used as a tool to plan your field trips, or just plan kind of your day events, or if you're going on a trip, catch up and learn about some of the birds that they have in that region. And then following on September 30th, also a Thursday at 7, we're going to be focusing more on the actual entering of checklists, kind of things that you can add in terms of notes that make it helpful for researchers that use eBird data for more science-focused stuff. So lots of fun stuff. If you're interested in learning anything more on eBird, there's from beginning to advanced, there's lots of stuff that we can overview. So come if you want.
And I'll put the link in chat. It's also on our website. And so you can get the link. So thank you, Kaylin. And then I'm so stoked because this year we're doing nature journaling. And I've been for the past year doing a lot of nature journaling on my own. And I just feel like, this could be a really great online activity for us when we're not able to be together, where we're exploring nature. And so nature journaling is not really focusing on making pretty pictures or anything. It's really slowing down and appreciating nature and learning how to notice things, how to bring out your wonders and things it reminds you of, and just really exploring that way. And so what we're going to do is just do an online thing. You don't have to have a lot of fancy stuff. If you have a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil, that's all you need. Or if you want to bring pencil crayons or paints or whatever, sure. And so, what we're going to do is each month we're going to have kind of a focus that's on our region. So this month we're focusing on owls in our area. And so we'll just be doing some sketching and some observation and learning about how can you put stuff in your nature journal. And then for the last half hour, I'm just hoping that we can really do a lot of community sharing of what people are doing, drawing or whatnot. And so again, this is on Zoom, and I'll put the link to this in the chat, and it's also on our website. And then we did do a survey last summer with everybody, asking people what kind of programs they wanted to see. And one of the things that we had a big response on was people wanted to have some formal classes that were fee paying. Obviously, our webinars, our field trips, and those kinds of things. And so we're really excited this year that we're going to have Thomas Bancroft doing a course that starts October 25th, and it goes 5 sessions every Thursday. And it's from 7 to 8:30. And he's just going over 100 common winter birds of Western Washington. And he's presented for us and has done a great job. He's an ornithologist. He's done a lot of work for National Audubon and whatnot. And so the registration is on the website. And obviously members have a better rate. And so if people want to become members, you can and get the cut rate. But yeah, so that will start on October 21st. And so now get your hands up in the air. We are gonna zip over. Fabulous applause. As Jay said, there were 5 people that really worked hard on, or 6, I guess. This started out with our website. We had one of our members who attends Washington State University for a technical writing course, worked with a team, and they reviewed our website, and they came back with recommendations and presented to the board. And this was back in October, and we decided, what, this is definitely something that we need to do, is become more current. And so from there, we had a team that started working together and meeting regularly and just envisioning what would, with the feedback that we got from the college students, what we could do to improve. And so we also looked at a couple of different Washington Audubon chapters, websites, and things we liked about them. And we were able to find out from one of the chapters, a consultant who they used, and Leslie Bigos, and she has been phenomenal in helping us set up our website. And so I'm going to try and share here with you. Hold on, I have to stop sharing for a second. Let me see here. Okay, sorry, 1 second. Okay, get your drum rolls ready. Here we go. I'm so excited to share this. We've been working so hard on this for so long, and it's just feels so great to see. And as Jay said, we're just in the, working out a few glitches and stuff. So if you come to the homepage, you have this wheel, Lauryn, you're there. And so the first part has a wheel, and it just has current events that are going on. So Common Winter Birds of Washington course, and it just keeps flipping. And so what you can do is you can click on that, and it will take you to the course. And so I won't go through all of it, but basically it has highlight stuff on the homepage. And if people want to do membership renewal or join or donate, they can just click on this button on the front page and it has it. We've got, obviously some descriptions about us and our chapter territory, conservation. We have, one of the things that we felt that was really missing is talking about our conservation and the current projects that we're doing so that people know what's going on. And so you can see, you can go, so here we're working on, M Street Marsh or Tequila Pond. And so if you want to read more about it, you can just click and it'll take you away to a more in-depth discussion of what's going on. So that's a new addition. We've got the nest boxes, and then advocacy, some of the different things that we're doing, that are at the government level, whatnot, signing on to sign-on letters. And so, for example, with the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, we've been, we signed on to the letter trying to get this reinstated. There's still work going on with it. And so you can click on, and if you want to add your voice to it, you can, sign on to different letters. So we've got a whole bevy of them in here that we've been working on in the past year, and including, Washington Legislative Advocacy Day that happens, usually it's in January. So hopefully that's more action oriented for people. And then obviously we go into some of what we've accomplished over the past 40 years. And then this page, the events page, is really exciting. So we've got the calendar. So obviously you can go here and you can decide if you want it just for the month or the day, and it'll show up what you want on the calendar. And so for example, like tonight, if you didn't have the link, you can just go on the website, hit events, click on Divas in the Treetops, and it takes you to the link so that you can find out what the presentation is about, and the link is here. So we feel like this is going to be a kind of like our one-stop shop where people can really find the resources. You don't have to sift through your emails, that everything's going to be here on the website so that it's really functional. Same with classes. The links are there, and, the nature journaling, field trips for now. Obviously we don't have any, but I think that the plan is to put the virtual ones up on here, or not virtual, but the self-guided. And then resources, we just have some information on that. And then, and getting involved, if you want to volunteer, there's you can click on this piece and it'll take you to looking at what volunteer opportunities we have. This other piece for partnering is if you know of different organizations or whatnot who are looking to partner with us. And then obviously our join button, that, if you want to get your membership, you can just do this online now, and it's quite easy. And so if you just want your individual, you basically just click on to the donation button, and it will take you to the PayPal to pay. Or if you aren't comfortable with that, you can still donate, filling out a check and mailing it in. So yeah, so we're very thankful for all of the hard work. Obviously, Natalie and Lorraine Wilson and Barbara Peterson, Carly Randall, Leslie Begos, myself, that just put in so much work, and then other board members and stuff. So it's really exciting, and we'd love to get some feedback from people. Take some time to take a look, and you can send us some info. So, and with that, does anybody have any questions about the website? If you want to type anything in chat, feel free to do that. And if not, then, sorry. I'm trying to get my toolbar here to stop sharing, and we'll turn it over to Jay with Lauren. Sorry. Jay, I think you mentioned the glitches, and here now I've got a glitch.
I don't know what to tell you.
Ah. Okay, sorry, I'm gonna try and, Jay, if you can, are you able to stop the share? Are you seeing my screen? Okay, I think it stopped this time.
Yeah, you've got it, Barb, or Cindy.
Okay. Let's stop sharing now, has it? Okay, there we go. Well, I'll turn it back to you, Jay, and let you get on with the presentation.
Well, I'm proud to invite Lauryn Benedict to be our speaker for our meeting tonight, and she deals with songbirds in North America and beyond. And you can see from our front page, she's holding a big microphone, and I'm pretty sure that wasn't a Canada goose right in front of her, but she's a professor at University of Northern Colorado, where she teaches about ornithology, animal behavior, and animal diversity. And we're very pleased to have you here tonight to present some of your findings and your expertise. So without further ado, I'm going to hand this over to Lauryn Benedict.
Thanks very much. All right, well, yeah, thanks for inviting me. Let me get my screen shared here. And I have to remember to share sound. Here we go. There will be sounds. Okay, how's that look? Are you seeing my slides now? Great. Yeah, so thanks again for inviting me. As you said, I'm Lauryn Benedict, and I study birds, and I've been doing this for a while now. And just like all of you, I became fascinated with birds at some point, and just spent a lot of time out there watching them, and found that what I got really interested in was kind of the behaviors of individual birds. I know a lot of people really like seeing communities, or really like seeing, all the different birds that might come through one place over the course of a year. What I really like about birds is watching what one individual is doing and starting to understand their behavior and asking questions about why they do that. And as I got interested in all of those topics, I sort of really found myself focusing on song, because I think that song is, well, it's beautiful to listen to. It's not a bad gig going out there, as you said, with a giant microphone, just listening to birds all day long. But it's also really important because it's how birds organize their social lives, and it's how they kind of communicate with each other. And so I became fascinated with it, and that's sort of what led me down this path. And so, yes, I have been working on researching birds and birdsong for a while now. So what I'm going to tell you about then today is some of that kind of topic that I'm interested in particular, which is birdsong by female birds. And I think that most of us as birders and ornithologists are used to assuming that when we hear a bird singing, it's probably a male. So for example, here's a bird, right? This lovely house wren belting out a tune. That could be a male, but that could also be a female, because in house wrens, females sing. And this is something that just isn't sort of our instinct all the time. So what I'm going to do tonight is tell you a little more about female birdsong, and maybe, I don't know, we'll think about it a little bit differently in the future as we learn more and more about this topic. So a quick roadmap. I'm going to talk about just birdsong quickly, in why birds sing, and then what is female song? What do I consider song, and how do we define that? Why I care about female song, and why I hope that you would care about female song as well. And then I'll give you plenty of examples of species that have female song, mostly in North America, because that's where I do the majority of my research. But of course, there's lots of female song in other parts of the world. In fact, it's more common in tropical places than it is in North America. And then at the end, I'm going to tell you a little bit about how, if you get really interested in this topic, you can help collect data and, advance the field. So that's the goal for tonight. And actually here, while I'm doing this, let me make sure I can see my chat. And if anybody has questions and wants to put them in chat, or even just stop and interrupt and, turn on your camera, raise your hand, ask me a question, I'm happy to do that as we go. So All right. So why do birds sing? Well, as I said, they sing to organize their social lives. And in their songs, they communicate a ton of information, right? So a bird that is singing is not just telling you, where it is. That bird is telling you who it is, species identity. We know this, right? We can hear the sounds of birds and we can say, oh, I know that's a Wilson's warbler singing right now. Birds know it too. They're indicating their location, their age, often their pairing status, because a bird might only sing when it is looking for a mate. Level of aggression. Sometimes birds that are singing are indicating very clearly their readiness to attack or fight another bird or defend their territory. And then also individual quality is something that a bird can advertise. We know that the songs of certain birds are higher performance than the songs of other birds. And this is a really important mating signal when they're choosing mates or potentially fighting off rivals. So lots of information in that bird song. And I am not the only person to recognize this, because for years, birdsong has been a model system. And researchers have studied this for many, many years, published tens of thousands of papers on birdsong, if not more than that. In fact, I recently looked it up, and over the last 20 years, there have been something like 27,000 papers on birdsong. So very well studied topic. We know a lot about the songs of birds. What are these things? What are the kind of aspects of bird song that people study? Well, a lot of that research is about how avian brains control and produce and understand song. So the neural system in their brains is really well worked out. We know which parts of the brain are responsible for both producing and recognizing and responding to birdsong. And this has become a really excellent model system for human language development and all kinds of kind of human neurobiological traits as well, because birds are probably the best analog in nature that we have for human language, because their songs have syntax and they have structure, and they're learned in many species of birds the same way that humans learn language. And so, through this research, we've learned a lot about things like the genes that control languages, not languages, but the genes that control the language ability in humans. So lots of great research there. In addition, there's a ton of research on birdsong that looks at how that song has evolved. It helps us understand kind of the way that evolutionary history might affect the sounds that birds make, and where different birds on kind of the avian tree of life belong, and how they make lots of different communication signals. So really important research out there. We have learned so much about animal communication and evolution and neurobiology and all of these huge topics from birdsong. But there's a little bit of a wrinkle here, because almost all of that research is done on male birds. And male birds do sing more than female birds in most places, certainly in temperate zones, but they're not the only ones who sing. And if we're not studying the females, then we're kind of missing half the picture, right? We're missing 50% of the individuals, and a lot of them are singing. So we're missing out on some really vital information, I would argue. So I think that studying females is going to hopefully give us a lot more insights into those questions of evolution and communication and neurobiology and everything else. So I'll tell you a little bit about kind of my personal journey and how it is that I got interested in females, and kind of when I had the realization that for me, the female vocalizations were just as interesting as male vocalizations. It was when I was doing my PhD dissertation. I was in California. I went to UC Berkeley for my PhD, and this was one of my backyard birds, the California towhee. And I started doing research on it, and everybody told me, oh my God, you couldn't have picked a more boring bird. They're just these dull brown birds. They're in everyone's backyard. What's interesting about the towhee? I'll tell you what's interesting about the towhee. What I found interesting about the towhee was their vocalizations. They have a male song that is sort of a typical song. It sounds like this. Is that sound coming through? If it's not, somebody wave at me or tell me. I'll just assume the sound is working.
It's perfect.
Great. Okay. So that's the song of the males. And the more I watched these birds, the more I realized that those males sang the songs early in the breeding season on a couple of territories And I would look closely at those territories, and I realized it was the territories where they didn't have a mate. So a male was singing to attract a mate. Once he got a mate, he stopped singing the song. And instead, he would defend his territory just by calling around the edges of it, kind of a tink, tink, tink call each morning. And then his other very frequently used vocalization was a squeal duet that he performed with his partner. And females, of course, were doing this squeal duet as well. And that sounds like this. And because these are monogamous territorial birds that will get a partner and stay with that partner for life and can live multiple years, it means that the males used that song for, maybe a month or two over the course of their life. And then they used their calls and they used the squeal duet, which the females also used as their main vocalization for the majority of the time that they spent communicating with other members of their species. And so that song was really kind of a less important part of their vocal repertoire. It was important for getting a mate, but after that, in terms of managing the rest of their life, those duets were really important, and the calls too. And I was just sort of, for me, it was really exciting that these female vocalizations were really driving so many of their pair interactions. So that kind of led me down the path of getting involved in studying female song and female vocalizations. And since then, I've studied a number of species. So I've done some research on warblers, I've done some research on swallows, and I've done a bunch of research on wrens as well. And I'll talk about little bits of that, bits and pieces of that as I go today. Okay, so I'm interested in females. And like I said, that Toei vocalization was this squeal duet, and it wasn't always called a song. And there's some debate about kind of what's a song and should it be a song. And separating avian songs from calls is a whole other thing that, even without the female perspective, that we could debate for a very long time. But for now, I'm going to try to think of sort of female song as analogous to male song. And I'm interested in female song in general. And so I've made some attempts to think about what I mean when I talk about song. So here, I'll give you a little overview of that. And before I do that, I think it's important to ask, okay, why do we even really need to spend time defining female song? Well, song as a bird trait has a history of being specifically a male trait. And if you go back in a lot of the sort of older research works, you find this. And here's sort of one example of this. Here's a book that if you go to the very first section on song, like the chapter on whatever it is, behavior, and then the section on bird song, the first thing it says is male birds of a number of species sing a courtship song to attract a mate and as a form of resource defense. So there we go. They're basically defining this trait as a male trait. Anyone want to guess when this book was published? You don't have to, but the second edition was 2020. So not that long ago. So this long history of defining this trait as purely a male trait lives on in some places in the literature, but I think is changing in other places. But because it's been defined that way for so long, we have these biases. We have it in our head that it's a male trait. And I think that needs to change because females, of course, produce lots of complex vocalizations and often produce a song that is basically just like the male song. So here's an alternative definition I'll propose of female song. And this is one that I and a co-author wrote in this article here. Bird song is any long, complex vocalization given by birds, especially during resource defense or mate attraction situations. So we're saying here that it's long and it's complex and it depends when they use it. It separates this definition that we've got here then separates songs from calls, which are more brief and used in different contexts, not usually used in mate attraction or resource defense contexts. But this definition also is not sex specific. So it doesn't rule out the possibility that females might be producing these. And then in addition, I don't confine song to songbirds. I think that hummingbirds can sing. I think that owls can sing. I mean, sure, it's debatable, but I think that we should be interested in any vocalization that has some complexity and some functionality, right? Why limit ourselves? And I don't think that then this is specific to female song. I mean, essentially, we should just define song for birds, and any bird that sings, sings. And I don't think that I'm the only one who thinks this. In fact, I know I'm not the only one who thinks this, because the most recent edition of the Cornell Labs Handbook of Bird Biology, I'm teaching ornithology right now, and we're using this as our textbook. This has a definition that's quite similar to ours. Their definition is that song is an often loud and sometimes complex vocalization used to attract mates or compete with members of the same sex. And so theirs is also not sex specific, but it defines song by its form. So it's relatively complex, and its function, that it is used to attract mates and to defend resources from members, usually members of the same sex, but not necessarily, just to defend resources. So cool. Here we go. We've got a definition, a working definition of song that works for male and female birds. And if we look at the sounds that birds make, we can find lots of examples of species that have songs in both males and females that have similar form and function. So here's one example. Here's a, the very familiar, I'm sure, dark-eyed junco. Here's a song that it might sing. I think it's coming again. There we go, classic junco trill, right? Very nice sound. And in this species, males sing more often than females, but females do sing, and they sound essentially similar. So that vocalization, I don't know if that's a male or female. So form can be similar. In addition, we know that in a lot of species, females have songs that function similarly to male songs. So here's a really well-studied example. This is from research done on alpine accenters, where they demonstrated that females sing to attract mates, and that song, in addition, has information content. So if you think back to my point that individuals can advertise their quality by singing, in this particular species, females that have more complex songs lay more eggs per clutch. So that song is an honest indicator of her breeding ability, her fitness, essentially. And then here's an example of a species that has form and function analogs between male and female songs. So female and male striped-headed sparrows have songs that sound really similar, and then both sexes use songs to defend their territories. And they live in groups, mixed species groups as well, and they'll all be chorusing together sometimes. And one thing that's very cool about this species that we know is that female striped-headed sparrows actually outsing male conspecifics. So females sing more than males in this species. And this is a tropical species, and that's something that's more likely to happen in the tropics, because in North America, I will say that females don't sing as much as males, for sure, but they sometimes do. Okay, so back to our definition. If song is any long, complex vocalization given by birds during resource defense or mate attraction situations, well, then we have plenty of examples of song in female birds, because we know that it's functional, and we know that it can be complex and the same as male song in structure. So, okay, now we've got a working definition of song. Now you might be asking, okay, so females sing. So does that matter? Why do we care? Well, if we care about male song, just because it's beautiful and it has inspired all of these research questions that so many people have investigated, then female song, if it's analogous to male song, ought to inspire the same sort of questions. We know that it has the same form and function as male song, so why not? Why aren't we asking the same kind of questions about it as we are about male song? So it's functional. In addition, female song is pretty widespread, and I mean that in two different ways. First of all, it's widespread across the tree of birds. So if this is our family tree of birds, kind of the evolutionary tree, you can find female vocalizations across all of the different branches on that avian tree of life. So there are lots of vocalizations that are unique to female ducks, for example. Males and females sometimes have very different vocalizations in that group. There are lots of great examples of species that have mutual mate displays. Think albatrosses and cranes and grebes and so on. And sometimes there are vocalizations involved in that. Owls and parrots, of course, have amazing vocalizations from males and females. And then in the songbirds, the passerines, we're learning more and more about female song every day. So I'm going to focus a little bit on that, on those songbirds. If we look at this branch here, all of our perching Asin passerines, so the species that learn their songs, those have been the focus of the majority of research studies on song in general. And that's the group where we have this general kind of assumption that all song is males. But that's not true. So female song is widespread in that it's found across the tree of birds. But even within that passerine group, female song is widespread in that it's found in a good number of species. So take a second here and ask yourself, if you had to estimate, of all songbird species, what percentage do you think have singing females? It's definitely not all of them. I'm not here to tell you that every female bird sings. But what percentage would you expect it to be? You can sort of get a number into your head. Okay, got a number? I'll give you the number that we've found in the literature. So research suggests that about 64% of species of songbirds have singing females. So about 2/3, which is, more than a lot of birders or ornithologists would assume. I talk to ornithologist colleagues all the time that are surprised by that number. And that is reflecting not necessarily, so in all 64% of species in which females sing, females still don't necessarily sing as often as males or exactly the same way that males do, but that's still a lot of female song that's out there. Now, this is more common in tropical species. So around here in North America, we have fewer singing females than that. So I don't know, take another minute, estimate in your head, what percentage of North American songbirds might have female song? Okay, got a number. Here's the number for Europe and North America. Temperate zone areas of the world, it's more like 40% of songbirds. Something, not quite a half of all of our songbird species, but still, that's a lot, right? Think of all the whatever songbird species you saw on your last birding trip, and almost half of them might have singing females. So it's really worth understanding who those species are and what it is that drives the presence of female song in all of these different groups. So it's widespread. Why is it that some females sing and some don't? And we have a history of asking this question, usually kind of from the other perspective. So when we see species where males and females are different and males are singing and females aren't, more often researchers end up asking the question, ooh, why do males have this trait? Why do males sing this really cool song? And they're ignoring the females. But I'm going to tell you now about a research study that demonstrated why you can't ignore the females. And this is not my research. This is research by Karen Odom and colleagues, but it's a really important piece of research that they did here. And what they did is they investigated the evolutionary history of song in both males and females in perching passerine songbirds. And a lot of it came from a whole bunch of cool Australasian species, many of which are illustrated here. And what they did is they created a tree, a family tree or phylogeny of all of these species of birds. And that's what I'm showing you now. And this is the most technical graph we'll get into tonight. But just to explain what we're looking at here, this is a phylogeny, which is a chart of the hypothesized evolutionary relationships between species. And what you see on the outside are modern species. So each one of those dots is an existing modern species of bird. And you can see a whole bunch of bird of paradise over here, and then bush shrikes and vangas and helmet shrikes, et cetera, over here. And any dot that's red is a species in which females sing. Any dot that's blue is a species in which females do not sing, where female song is absent. So in the birds of paradise, for example, where we tend to think of those really dramatic looking males, the males are singing and of course displaying, and they're beautiful. And very infrequently do the females sing. Most of the time, females in that group do not sing. But in many, many of these other groups, there's a lot of female song. And based on that, you can then estimate what the ancestors of those species might have done. So the ancestor of the drongos, which all have female song, probably had female song, whereas the ancestor of the birds of paradise over here might not have had female song. So if you keep tracing back the ancestors, each place where the branches converge is an ancestor. Eventually you get all the way back to this single ancestor here that is the hypothesized or the theorized ancestor of all modern songbirds. And that pie chart shows you the probability that that ancestor had female song. And it's pretty high, right? If you look at that pie chart, essentially it is telling you that the ancestor of all modern songbirds had singing females in that species. And that's really important because if all of our modern songbirds are descended from ancestors with singing females, then we really should be asking our research questions about females. The question is not, why did males start singing? The question is, why did females stop singing? And it kind of changes the script, and it makes it really important to start understanding when female song is used and why some species might have it and some might not. Okay, so hopefully then you're on board with my premise here that we should care about female song. It's widespread, right? 64% of species have it. It's functional. We know that females use it in a lot of the same ways as males, and it has a really important, interesting evolutionary history that we understand and we can kind of think about as we're studying female song. So we know a little bit about female song now. We understand kind of, yeah, the evolutionary history. And we also have a decent handle, not great, but decent handle on what species have female song and why some are more likely to sing, some females are more likely to sing than others. If we look at the research, what research has been done, they can give us some clues as to traits of certain species that seem to promote female song in those species. So first, tropical species have more female song than temperate zone species. That's widespread. So if you remember, in North America, about 40% of songbird females sing, or 40% of species, songbird species have singing females. In the tropics, it's much higher. There are also certain traits of species that seem to promote female song. So monogamous species that are territorial and non-migratory are more likely to have retained female song from their ancestors, whereas migratory species more often have lost female song. And because tropical species, a lot of tropical species are monogamous, territorial, and non-migratory, all four of those things kind of go together. So if we think about some of those tropical examples, for example, there are Australian magpies and superb fairy wrens, and both of these species are really known for having amazing singing females. And in some populations of both of those species, females actually sing more than males do, just like that stripe-headed sparrow. In basically, yeah, in all of the species in which female song is more common than male song, all of those species are tropical or subtropical in origin. Okay, but here we are in North America, and as I told you before, I'm really interested in North American birds. So they're not tropical, at least not here in Colorado or Washington. But we do have plenty of monogamous, territorial, non-migratory species. And so many of the species in North America that have good amounts of female song fit that description. They're monogamous, territorial, non-migratory. So a few examples: the American dipper, which I hear you guys have great dippers where you are. So I'm going to tell you a little more about dippers in a moment. But this is a species in which we don't have good research data, but people have suggested that females might sing just as much as males. So go study that. I know some of you are working on documenting that, which is great. Black-capped chickadees, another very common species across much of the US, and males and females both sing their typical Phoebe song. And those songs convey lots of information about breeding readiness and also individual identity. So individual chickadees in a flock can recognize all of their flock mates' identities. Oh, that's Bob and that's Sally and so on, based on their Phoebe songs. And then to get to my point that not all song has to come from songbirds, hummingbirds also have singing females. So for example, the Costa's hummingbird song. Okay, so, well, many of these monogamous, non-migratory, chickadees, dippers fit the bill. some hummingbirds, and some others are partially migratory. But it seems to be that a lot of these monogamous non-migratory species, because males and females live in the same place year round and are sort of true partners in defending the territory, and both are really involved in that, then song seems to be really useful to both of them. So they keep their song and females sing. Whereas in some of our migratory species, we've lost that. But back to dippers. So just because dippers are cool, and I heard you guys are interested in dippers, thought I'd tell you what people do know about dippers. So nobody has ever published a research article focused on the songs of American dippers. That's it. Like if you look in the birds of the world, there's information on female song. There are observations in other kind of places, but there has never been any really dedicated research on it. There is good research on white-throated dippers. So European species, right? Not our American species, but they've shown good evidence that females sing really regularly. Here's a graph from a paper that came out in 2019. So in the last couple of years, actually, they've just started doing the research on this. And what this is showing you is the proportion of individual males and females that sing during different times of the year. So you can see that in January, right at the beginning of that year, you've got females in the white bars. Actually, more females are singing than males. And then that declines a little. Interestingly, males kind of keep their singing rate up throughout the year. Females have a real peak in January, and then it goes down a little bit later on. So they're still investigating why males and females might use their songs differently and what the function of them is at different times of the year. Lots of really interesting research questions there that people haven't figured out. And like I said, we don't know for American dippers, but maybe it's a trend like this. Who knows? It would be fun to study. A few other species that we do know a little more about. So the northern cardinal is probably the best studied North American female singer. They have songs that are, well, dramatic, recognizable, pretty beautiful. Okay, I think I just had the one song there. And that song could have been from a male or female bird. I don't know which. This is one of the few species where people have studied not just that female sing, but how females learn their songs. And it turns out that male and female songs sound similar because males can learn songs from females and vice versa. So this is not a sex segregated trait, right? Anybody can learn from anybody in that population. And so northern cardinal populations have a whole mix of song types that are sung by males and females, which I think is really interesting. There are other species in which males and females obviously don't learn from each other, and this is one of them. And this is one of my personal favorites because this is one of the species that I've done research on. So I took this picture outside of Fort Collins, not far from my house, where I do research on canyon wrens. And so we spend a lot of time, I and my collaborators and students spend a lot of time out recording birds. That picture that Jay highlighted at the beginning of me with my microphone, I was probably pointing it at a canyon wren. And so we might see a bird up on a cliff like this, and that bird might sing a song. And I'm going to show you first the spectrogram of that song. So if you're not used to looking at spectrograms, this is a way of visualizing sound, essentially. So we have time on the x-axis and frequency, audio frequency on the y-axis. So high-pitched sounds are up here, low-pitched sounds are down there. If it's a real tonal whistle, it'll be more of a flat line. And if it's kind of a broadband white noise kind of sound, it'll be more of a blob like this. Okay, so now that I've explained that, here's the sound that creates this spectrogram. There we go. So we go out, we hear that sound, we see the bird on the cliff. What do we know about this bird? Anything? Yes, that's a male. Male canyon wrens always sing those songs that's kind of that descending cascade of notes, and then sometimes they add that chi-chi note at the end. So we spent a lot of time in the field listening to these birds singing this, and sometimes we would see a bird that sang a song that looked like this. you can see just from the spectrogram, it's very different, and it sounds like this. There you go. So what's that bird telling you? That bird is indicating it's a female. Male and female songs in that species are distinct. They have really distinct structures, and that's really nice for us as researchers because we can tell if we're looking at a male and a female. But it's also, I think, very useful for the birds because it allows them to communicate what sex they are, and they then can defend their territories against members of their species of the same sex. So canyon wrens readily use this song when they have intruders on the territory. They will attack those intruders and they will sing at them, and males sing male song at males and females sing female song at females, but they don't usually sing their songs to the opposite sex, interestingly. So it's clearly something they're using to defend their territories from members of their same sex. Okay, so here's another one with really interesting songs where males and females sound a little bit different. And like those California towhees that I mentioned at the beginning, this is a species in which you get partner duets. And again, not a songbird, but still really interesting male and female vocalizations. So this barred owl might sing a duet, well, it and its partner might sing a duet that sounds something like this. And I'll play this for you. Okay, so in there you can hear there's kind of a higher pitched sound. That's these little notes here. The these higher. I think you can see my cursor. I hope you can see my cursor. And then there's the ooh, which are these low down, sort of these longer notes falling in here. Okay, that's a ooh. Yeah, I'm not good at repeating the sound. You get the idea. Which of those would you guess would be the male and which would be the female? You could think about that for a second, and I will illustrate for you who is singing what part. So in this case, blue is the male, and they're doing those high-pitched notes, and red is the female, and they're doing that lower kind of bass line. So I'll play it again so that you can listen for it now that you're seeing the lines. Did you follow that? Yeah. So I think that's a really cool example of a duet from a species in which the female is singing the lower part. We often think of the male as being the lower one to vocalize. And interesting, vocalizations do relate to body size. Bigger birds sing lower pitched sounds. And in owls, like in most, as in other raptors, females are usually the bigger member of the pair. So it actually kind of makes a lot of sense. Okay, and while I'm on the subject of duets, I can't talk about female song without talking about some of the most amazing songs and duets, which come from a lot of our neotropical wren species. So we have, and these are just two examples out of there's a whole family of neotropical wrens that have really fascinating duets. And I'll just play a couple of them for you. So the first is the Rufous and White wren, which has a beautiful song that I will play, and you can hear kind of the male part first and the female part, and she has a little whip note at the end of it, so you can hear that. And then the female and then the male again. Isn't that lovely? I just really like those sounds. Such a beautiful sounding bird. And in this case, males and females are singing, kind of overlapping their songs to create that duet. Here's another example of an amazing song that includes males and females from another neotropical wren. This is the happy wren. And in this species, males and females don't sing on top of each other. They don't overlap their sounds at the same time. They alternate them really precisely. So what you'll see on the spectrogram here is this is the male sound, his kind of phrase. And then this is the female, and then male, female, male, female. They go back and forth. If you weren't watching them, or maybe standing between them so that you could hear that it's coming from two different places, it would be really easy to think that this was a single bird singing. Listen to it and see if you can distinguish the two parts. And it goes on for a while, but yeah, amazing. Just blows my mind every time. I'm gonna do it again. Yeah, just such a neat song, and unbelievable to think about how both the males and the females are so precisely timing those contributions to that duet. There's actually research that's been done on the brains of the birds as they're singing, asking kind of what's happening in their brain. And you can see that the neurons are firing as if they're singing when both they are singing and when they're silent and their partner is singing. So it's kind of like they're singing both parts in their head, but only actually singing one part out loud. And if you've ever sung in a chorus or anything, you've probably done something similar, right? You know what everybody else is singing. You're thinking what they're singing, but then you're only singing what you're singing. So it's really great research there, helping us understand, again, how brains work and how we produce sounds and communication. Okay, so I've given you plenty of examples here of species that have female song. These are just some of the ones that I picked for this particular talk. I could have gone on and on because, of course, 64% of songbirds, which is 5,000 species or so, have female song. So lots and lots of species out there. And we think that that 64% number is a pretty good estimate, but I don't think that we actually know really how many species do have female song, or how often females sing in the species that have female song, because as I said in the beginning, we all have a tendency to just hear a singing bird and kind of jump to the conclusion that it's male. We know that that happens. And I think because of that, or I know because of that, kind of the data that we have about female song is a little skewed. And here's a concrete example I'll give you that I think highlights that better than anything else. And that relates to this species, the striped-headed sparrow, which, if you remember, we saw before. This is the species in which males and females have songs that sound alike, and they both use them for territory defense. And research where they had individually marked birds so they knew exactly who was who showed that females sing more than males do. Okay, so we know females sing more than males do. But in public kind of contributions to what we know about female song, that's not really reflected. So you can look in the Macaulay Library, which is a wonderful resource that's based at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and it's a public repository of natural sounds, and anybody who's recording sounds can donate them to the library, and anything you record through eBird now goes to the Macaulay Library. So the Macaulay Library has 54 recordings of song in this species, and of those recordings, 9 of them are marked male song. You want to guess how many are marked female? None at all. And this is a species in which we know that females sing more than males. So our kind of guesses about what we're seeing in the world are not always reflecting the way the world works. And it's because we have this bias that we're used to. So I think really we want to overcome that by just making people more aware that in many species, including this one, females are singing. So you just don't want to jump to any conclusion. You don't want to make assumptions. And I think that people are starting to do that, right? More and more, we're getting new data on female song, and people are more and more often reporting female song. And I think that's really great. It's really exciting for me as a researcher in this field. So just a few examples. Here's an article from a couple years ago about a paper that showed that female cerulean warblers sing. That was a cool one. Here's one from just earlier this year, March of 2021, on flycatchers. And this one's great. If you look at the bottom, I really like the overview of it and then the quote here. So This is the researcher talking about their research in dusky-capped flycatchers. And in this species, males and females look identical. And of course, in something like a northern cardinal, where the female looks very different from the male, it's easy to know when you are hearing female song. In a flycatcher, it's a lot harder to know. So you have to do a more focused study and observation. And the researcher, the lead researcher on this project, Glenn Seeholzer, said, discovering that female dusky-capped flycatchers sing changed my perspective. If somebody had asked me what sex sings the most, I probably would have said the male, until I went out there and really did the research, is kind of the gist of it. And I think that's the way a lot of us feel, right? If somebody asked, yeah, I would have said male. But when we get out there and we look, we're finding more and more that females are really important singers. And so in this species, they actually have more song from females than males. So you now might be asking yourself at this point, okay, but how do I know? Where do I go to look for female song? How do I figure out if female song even exists? How do I look for it? All of those kinds of things. Well, if you want to know if there's a possibility that whatever species you're looking at or thinking about has female song, here are some resources that are really useful. First of all, that Macaulay library that I mentioned before, you can go to the Macaulay library and you can just search their recordings of all kinds of species and see if you find recordings that are marked female song. And that's a great indicator. Xenocanto, which is another online repository of songs and just natural sounds in general, also has great resources, and you can do the same thing there. And then I really love this field guide. So this is the Eastern North America one, but there's a Western version as well. This is Nathan Peeplow's Field Guide to Bird Sounds of North America. And in there, he has spectrograms of lots of songs and vocalizations of all kinds, not just songs, but calls, duets, etc., of lots of different species of birds. And he's really good. He's very clear about which vocalizations come from males and which come from females. So that's an excellent resource. And then if you subscribe to Birds of the World, this is it's paywalled, so you need to have a subscription. But if you don't have a personal subscription, a lot of libraries have it. The Birds of the World is perhaps the best resource. When you want specific information about any one species, go to the Birds of the World. It's not perfect because we don't know everything about every species of birds, but whatever we do know, really, they have compiled that information very well. And then recently, All About Birds has started adding more information. So for example, if you go to the All About Birds page on Bullock's Orioles, they have examples of different sounds that they make. They've got song, 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 female song, calls. So, you know, they're not considering female song song in exactly the same way as male song, but that's okay. They're indicating that females sing. And I think that's really important because the more kind of visible that is, the more people are going to not assume that they're hearing a male when they might be hearing a female. And in something like an Oriole, usually you can tell because they're dimorphic, they look different. So the final resource that I will mention, if you want to know more, is this femalebirdsong.org, which is a really great website that was created by another friend and collaborator, Karen Odom, and others. And it has really good information on there about kind of target species, why we study female song, lots of the things that I talked about tonight. So check it out if you're interested in femalebirdsong.org. And if you can, you know, spend some time out there listening and looking, and just when you hear a bird sing, thinking about whether you're sure it's a male or whether it might be a female. And if it might be a female, and you can document that in some way, that's fantastic, because researchers like myself and Karen and others absolutely use data from these public repositories. So if something goes onto eBird or into the Macaulay library, we will find it as a great example of female song, and we will use it. And, you know, yeah, credit everyone who is donating all of their wonderful recordings and observations. So for today, kind of, I will ask you, if you are interested in this, please do look, listen, document your observations, and then share them. And I'll give you one example of how you could do that. So I am psyched to hear that you're having a how to use eBird workshop soon. If you haven't used eBird much, and you want to learn, it's a great tool. And what I'm showing you here is an eBird checklist that was submitted by a friend of mine, Justin Stahl, earlier this year, again, March of 2021. And Justin works and lives out on San Clemente Island, where he runs the Shrike project that they have going on out there. And he's an avid birder and an e-birder. And they've had this rusty blackbird female that was kind of hanging out all winter, which was a little bit weird because if you look at the range of a rusty blackbird, you wouldn't expect it in Southern California, although there are a couple of dots there. I guess it's a vagrant there often enough that it deserves 2 dots on this particular map. In any case, he had a female rusty blackbird hanging out and watched her, and eventually, or not eventually, but watched her for a while. And on this particular day in March, she was singing. And so he wrote that in there. He has the notes. He's got images to document what she looked like, and then a recording of the song. And that's a really fantastic resource, because now anybody wondering if female rusty blackbirds ever sing can go to this eBird checklist and say, oh yeah, there's evidence that they do. So we really, learn a lot from those kinds of observations. And then there are all kinds of other fun observations. So for example, you might recognize this beautiful female, subtle coloring compared to the male, but that's okay. Here's a tweet from Ted Floyd, who's the editor of Birding Magazine. And in his tweet here, he has this video that I'll show you, where he points out that here she is singing a song. And this is the video. So there you go. Just like the observation on eBird, that is a really nice recording that documents female song in this species. And this one's particularly interesting to me because if you go back to that Birds of the World account that I mentioned before, it actually says that females don't sing. So sometimes that information is wrong. Clearly they do. Okay, so that's kind of all of my overview of female song. And I want to bring it back before I wrap up here to this big question of why, what will we do with all of these observations of female song? Well, remember, bird song is a model system for how brains control behavior and communication. And if we're studying those female brains as well as the male brains, it just gives us so much more information and so many more points of comparison, because there are lots of species in which females sing just as much as males, and then some in which females sing less than males, and some in which females sing differently from males. And all of those comparisons will give us so much more information than just studying the male brain alone would. As a second point, we know that this complex songs of birds are language-like, and they have evolved in really complicated ways. And so studying how they have evolved gives us really important insights into the evolution of complicated traits, natural traits. And that's one of the things I'm really interested in. And then as a last point, one that I think is really important here too, is that if we understand female song, how many females are singing, how often they're singing, at what time of year they're singing, etc., we're going to have a much better understanding of how many birds are out there in local populations. And we can use that in important ways when we're doing conservation work to try and maintain healthy populations of birds. So as many of you know, if you've done breeding bird surveys or other things like that, one of the most common ways that people sort of estimate population sizes of birds is that they go out and they do point counts, where you stop and you stand in one place and you look for birds and you listen for birds. Sometimes you see them, but more often you hear birds, right? And you count how many you are hearing. And a lot of point counts will take that count. So I hear 10 chickadees, or 4 chickadees around me in 4 different places. Okay, that's 4 males, that's probably 4 territories, that's 8 birds. But if what you're hearing is 4 chickadees that is actually 2 males, 2 females, that's only 2 territories and 4 birds. So if we really want to understand and accurately estimate population sizes so that we can better conserve birds, understanding both male and female song is going to be really important for that. So in all these ways, I think knowledge of female song will contribute a lot to our understanding of birds in the world. So with that, I will leave you then with my message to look, listen, document, and share. And then I'll remind you that that's that femalebirdsong.org website that's really useful. And I'll say, if any of you happen to be teachers of middle schoolers to high schoolers, this galacticpolymath.com is a place where we have a lesson for middle to high schoolers about female song and barn swallows. And yeah, if teachers are interested, that's there as useful research. So with that, yes, I want to thank everyone and thank you all for listening. And I know it's getting a little late, but hopefully that wasn't too long.
I have a quick question, Lauren.
Yeah.
Does the fact that the female nest and wants to keep her nest secret have to do anything with her song?
So it might. It's an interesting question because in all those tropical birds, you know, females are doing the same thing and they're still singing. They're just usually not singing at the nest. Interestingly, there are some birds that sing on the nest, which is very weird. Like vireos and female mockingbirds are known for doing this. And you would think that that would be a really terrible idea because all of the predators would hear you. But yeah, there are some that sing from the nest. So it doesn't seem to be as strong a selective force as you might think. But one of the things that does matter relating to nests, it's probably in the migratory species, some of the reason that those migratory females no longer sing is that when you're migrating, that's a lot of energy going into migration. And then you have a shorter breeding season because you only get the time, you know, of that window before you have to migrate back. And because that breeding season is so condensed, the males and females have kind of divided up the tasks. So the females do all the breeding and take care of the nest, and their energy focused on the nest there means that, you know, they're really devoting all their energy to that. So the males are doing all of the territory defense and singing. And so in that sense, yes, that nesting behavior might be driving the lack of singing.
Any other questions for Lauren?
I see one in the chat here. Yes, 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 yes. Birding by ear, absolutely. Yes. Oh, I'm glad you enjoyed that. And I don't know that BBS entries are wrong. I just think that, and you're doing them the way you're supposed to be doing them, and you're doing them the way they've always been done, which actually is in itself important, right? If anybody's doing breeding bird surveys, we shouldn't change that now because it needs to be done the same way consistently year after year after year. But we might rethink, you know, all of the things they're telling us. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. I always do. I don't know how to tell the chickadees apart between male and female. Do they have a different song that would help?
They don't, unfortunately. So if you look and measure all the really kind of technical details of it, there are very slight differences in the pitch of the song, but it's nothing that I can hear by ear. And it's nothing that, as far as I know, anybody can hear by ear. So unfortunately, no, the song sounds the same. I think the best way is probably if you catch them during the breeding season, looking at the behavior. And females are doing more of the kind of nest making, nest building, incubation, those kinds of things. And other than that, it is hard to know. And that is absolutely one of the challenges with knowing whether you are hearing a male or a female singing in monomorphic species where males and females look alike. It's really hard to know unless you do catch them, unless you watch them really closely and you see a behavior that would indicate it. So for example, you know, you see a copulation and then you see them sing, or you see an incubating bird come off the nest and sing, and you know that only females incubate in that species. Or maybe you see a pair together and they're both singing. That indicates that it's going to be the male and the female.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah. I see one in the chat too. One of my biggest research surprises. That's an interesting question. I think barn swallows was a big surprise for me. So there have been literally over 1,000 research studies on barn swallows. And I and a collaborator were just looking for examples of female song because we wanted to understand, you know, how often it happens. And so we were just sort of emailing random people we knew that studied certain species. And so we knew there was a researcher studying male songs in barn swallows. And we emailed him and I was like, have have you ever noticed any female vocalizations at all? And he wrote back, he was like, yes, females totally sing. I was just looking at my data on this. And I thought, how have there been 1,000 papers on this species and nobody has said this before? And if you look, if you dig deep, it is there in the Birds of the World report. There's just no information on it, right? And so that's where I then ended up working with that guy on a project, and we, into 2020, published the first ever paper about female song in this species that has been so well studied. So I think what surprises me is that every now and then, well, that there are species that we think we know so much about that there are singing females and we're not knowing it. And what's also really interesting there is that all the time I will be at conferences and people will come up to me and they'll say, oh yeah, I have a banded population of this species. And every now and then females sing, but we just sort of never really thought anything of it. So lots of people tell me about singing females in lots of different species that hasn't been reported. So it's out there. It's just that it's happening. It is rare. I mean, my canyon wren females sing a lot less than the males do. So you got to be looking for it to see it and hear it. Yes, and here, let's see. With the research conducting on song learning, we know so little about song learning in females. We know the cardinal example is one of the really few examples. There are, as far as I know, only 2 studies that have ever done experiments where they put females into any kind of controlled captive environment and sort of exposed them only to certain songs. And the classic experiments on male song learning all came from doing that with male birds, right? They would take sparrows into a lab and then raise them in isolation and see if they could sing their song, and then raise them to see if they could learn the songs of their own species versus other species. Tons of experiments have done that on male songs. Yeah, only 2 on females. One is cardinals, who absolutely can learn male songs. They can learn any cardinal song. And then the other is one species of an Australian finch. It's one of the Astrolbid finches, and I can't remember which. And females seem to learn some kind of similarly to males, but not exactly, and they don't quite know what's going on. So that question of how females learn and who they learn from and when and what they're capable of learning is a completely open question.
Well, I think that's it for the questions, Lauren. And I just feel sad in that I'm losing my hearing.
Spectrograms, record them and look at the spectrograms.
I think you're right. And watching you tonight, I got a really good idea what a spectrogram is. So I'm glad you showed those.
Yeah, they're a great tool. And now that Merlin has everybody used the new Merlin sound identification app? That's really cool. It's I give it.
Hey, Lauren.
Yeah.
Lauren, this is Dale. Can you briefly describe how they were able to determine the neural networks in the birds' brains?
Yeah. So the duetting ones, you mean? Or do you mean?
Well, just any of them.
Oh, any of them. Okay. So
Yeah.
back in the day, they started out with just lesioning different parts of the brains, you know, when they started doing this work 50 years ago, et cetera. They would, cut out little parts of the brains and see what happens. And then they started using this technique where they figured out kind of what proteins would be expressed right after certain neurons were active. So they would have the bird sing, and then they would sacrifice the bird, and they would stain their brain for those proteins. And so they could see, okay, ooh, these always light up when the bird is singing. And so that's how they started locating those areas. And once they did that, now these days, they even can record from particular neurons in live birds, so they can tap into them, into the brains. It's crazy stuff, and it's very invasive. And it's mostly done, it's usually not done on wild birds. It's usually done on zebra finches and canaries in the lab, where they're doing that, and they're actually measuring recording activity of specific neurons in the brain.
Any other questions?
Bird fMRIs are next. I think they might have done some. I don't even know that very well, but yeah.
Well, we want to thank you again, Lauren. And the third Monday of every month, we have a meeting, and you got our website. So we expect to see you every once in a while.
All right, yeah, it's a beautiful website, whoever redid it.
Well, thank you. I'm very proud of the people that worked on that, and keep on trucking. Cindy, did you want to say something?
I'm going to jump in and just say, Lauren, this was just so incredible. My mind is filled with all these things that I just want to go and research. And I just, I find it also exciting when you think about human communication and what's on the frontier with us of learning more in terms of connecting between birds and humans and communication. So thank you for your expertise and your commitment. And everybody get your hands up and give her a big clap, because you rocked. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Loved it.
Well, if with no further ado, it's what, 9:23 where you are? Time to go to bed.
Yep. Gotta get up early to catch the birds.
There you go. And if you ever want to come out and do some American Dipper research with us, come on out. We'd be happy to have you.
Great, thank you.
Okay, everybody, I'm going to sign off and just remind everyone we've got plenty of Zoom meetings coming up in this month and next month, and lots to learn if you want to. So go to our website and sign up. Thank you.